Let's break this further down with royal expert Robert Shooter, who is joining us now on the phone. Good to have you on the show, Robert. So a lot of people wonder if this is a complicated legacy that the Queen leaves behind. What are your initial thoughts at her passing at age 96 today?
I mean, at first, I'm just incredibly sad about it. To wake up this morning in New York and see this statement from Buckingham Palace about her health really told us that today was probably going to be the day. The Queen does not like anybody to talk about her health. She's quite private about it. So the fact the Palace put out a statement this morning saying that she was being closely monitored led us all to believe that the news was not going to be good. Then we saw the royal family fly up to Scotland on their private jet. Harry, too, arrived in Scotland, so we knew the news was very, very bad. And then ultimately, when they finally did announce just a few hours ago that the Queen has passed, just great, great sadness.
And Rob, once the news sets in, what to you is her enduring legacy?
I think the fact that she managed to survive in an institution that really was based in the past. Many royal families have gone throughout Europe, and the British royal family is still there 70 years into her reign, and I think it's because of how adaptable she was, and it's still hard to say that, isn't it, to put her in the past tense, but we have to do that now. We've moved on and we already have a new king. So I think the fact that she could keep this institution alive and vibrant and important and relevant in a world that was no longer really in touch with how this organization was set up.
Rob, talk to us about the impact she had just on shaping how the future of the monarchy is going to and will look.
Yeah, well, she completely modernized it when she first became queen 70 years ago. It looked very different than it did today, and so she's definitely modernized the family. I think moving forward, we're going to see it modernized even more with Prince Charles. He has said in the past that he sees a much smaller royal family, just the real inner workings, and a lot of people of the extended family now will be expected to get jobs. They will have to pay their own way. I could actually see, and this sounds quite revolutionary, but a time when Buckingham Palace becomes a great museum and the royals live in apartments instead of in these huge palaces. That's a little bit ahead of myself here, but I would imagine now massive, massive changes from Prince Charles. The world has changed around this family, and they're very, very aware of it. So massive changes by the Queen, and I think we should expect more rather quickly.
And Rob, when you think of the key milestones in her life, what do you think really stands out to you the most?
Oh, it's so interesting. This young girl who was not meant to be queen, she was born a really sort of minor royal. If it was not for her uncle abdicating, she would never have sat on the throne. So born in a townhouse in London, not a palace, and going on to be the queen and doing it with such grace, kindness, I think that's what we're going to remember her for, the longest-serving monarch in British history. Also, too, let's remember here, she was sitting on the throne at a time when women were not sitting at the table making decisions. So I think she opened, hopefully, a lot of doors, but also, too, very complicated. This is a woman who was given this by birthright, and that's something now that I think feels very foreign to many, many people. So the fact she could adapt is something, too, that I think we're going to remember.
Fitting that you just ushered in yet another female prime minister. Look, Rob, we're often inundated with shots of chaos and commotion in Parliament, of divisiveness, but that has never been the case with the Queen. How has she stayed out of that fray for so long?
She won't talk about politics. Maybe it's a lesson that we could all learn at the dinner table. She will not talk about politics. She has never indicated what party, what political organization she supports, and I think that has served her very well in a world where everybody now appears to be political, including the Supreme Court here in America. She's maybe the last institution, the last vestige of somebody that's managed to stay above it. And now that's going to be quite tricky for her son. Her son is a huge environmentalist. He's spoken out about saving the planet, about global climate change, and now it'll be interesting to see if he pivots into a position that his mother took, which is to never talk about this stuff, or if indeed he's going to double down on it. But I think you're right here. When we're all so divisive, she's one last person, or one of the few last people that we can all admire, both sides.
And Rob, the international reaction, I want to bring that up as well. French President Emmanuel Macron tweeting just earlier this afternoon, quote, "I remember her as a friend of France, a kind-hearted queen who has left a lasting impression on her country and her century." Just talk to us about the impact that the queen has had on a global scale and not just within the people of Britain.
Yeah, it's interesting. She is a global figure. She's not somebody that is just part of Britain. World leaders would get very excited to meet her. I spoke to John Bolton from the Trump administration a couple of months ago, and he told me one of the highlights of his career was meeting Queen Elizabeth when President Trump went over to Britain. So although her actual role as a constitutional monarch is very limited. On paper, it actually looks like she does very little, but in reality, her power, the power she had to influence, to really change things was enormous, and I'm not sure her son is going to have that, the new king. But you're right, she was a global figure and somebody that had a sort of a wonderful sense of humor, too. There's stories coming out now about the time she met George Bush and how she would giggle. And I remember a news conference where they forgot to put a podium for her to stand on, so it looked like her hat gave her a news conference, and she had a great fun with that. So I think, too, you've got to remember, not only was she the queen, she was a human being. And today she's leaving behind a family who's mourning this huge loss.
And that certainly is important to remember, that doesn't get lost in all of this when you think about the pomp and circumstance that come with the monarch passing. I do want to ask you, though, obviously she was head of state of a number of Commonwealth countries, including Canada and Australia. What do you think this means for those countries?
Well, it's been quite tricky. Even with Queen Elizabeth around, these countries were starting to move away. On a recent tour, William and Kate felt this too. And so it's a very troubled history that Britain has with being colonialists around the world. And now I would imagine that this is only going to accelerate that process. I think as long as she was still on the throne, these countries would stay within the Commonwealth. I think they probably will. There will be some sort of organization, some sort of umbrella. But I think, unfortunately, and it would break her heart, the days of the Commonwealth are probably in the past. I would imagine moving forward now, it's going to accelerate these countries wanting to step away from being part of Great Britain.
Wow, very interesting what's to come. But right now, if you could, Rob, talk about the backdrop at which the Queen leaves us, a new prime minister, and what appears to be a coming recession, how difficult a time this is for the UK, even without this, and for King Charles III.
Absolutely. Let me just say, too, this shows you who she was, who she is. I can't think of a better example than 2 days before she dies, she's working. She meets the Prime Minister. A friend of mine in Britain who knows the family very well told me today she was not exactly a take the day off work type of person. She showed up every single day. She never called in sick, and just 2 days ago, she was still functioning as the head of state, and I think that tells you so much about this incredible person. Moving forward, it'll be very, very difficult now. Not only does the new Prime Minister have a daunting task ahead of them, Prince Charles, too, is stepping in to these very big shoes, and at a time when the country is divided, there's great inflation, people are worried about jobs over there. It's going to be a very difficult time, and I think we've lost that steady hand who has been guiding the ship for so long. So I think this does not help. This is going to be a very, very difficult moment.
Rob, as we remember the Queen, what are the series of events that will take place over the next couple of days?
Over the next couple of days, her body will be brought back to London. She will be put The coffin will be on display where the public can go and send their condolences, sign a condolence book, and then within 10 days there will be a state funeral. It looks like it's going to be at Westminster Abbey. It will be attended by dignitaries from all around the world will be coming, and then we will have Prince Charles's coronation. So Charles is already technically the king. Tomorrow he will be confirmed as the king, and then his coronation will follow the funeral. And I think that is a way that the system is set up really in quite a clever manner. So after this intense mourning, then we can have this hopefully intense celebration. They want to make sure the royal family does that this is passed on in a dignified way, that the transition is very, very smooth. And this is something that I think is so interesting. Queen Elizabeth had her hand in all this. She planned her own funeral. She decided where people are going to sit, what she wants sung, what hymns, where she wants it. So this is going to be the send-off that she wants, and I think that's very important to remember.
Indeed. Well, thank you for breaking that down with us on this tough day. Rob Shooter, thank you so much as we mourn the passing of Queen Elizabeth II at age 96.